first set we talked about was the 4 types of sinners. And the first one is the incorrigible. We define that by Psalm 14, Psalm 53. The fool has said in his heart, there's no God. And we can go at length into different kinds of fools, which we don't have time in this kind of framework, but you can do that yourself. There's at least 6 different kinds of fools, and they are not all treated the same, so you can look that up yourself. Once a person becomes, as Peter says, he is visited by God. We don't know what that means necessarily, but something awakens him. He's just going about his life, doing whatever he wants. He's not interested in spiritual things. He's just completely focused on this life. And something brings him to a place. The prodigal son was a fool. He left his home. He spent all of his money. He wasted it as though there was no God, as though there was no accountability for him. But he came to a place where he had to think about that. And God was able to visit him. And that place was hunger. He had spent everything he had. Now he was at a place where he was hungry. And he went and he became a servant in order to feed swine and take care of pigs. And in that situation where he was actually looking at these pigs and thinking about where he had come from, he came to his senses and he became awakened. Now, the same thing happened to the woman at the well. She was going out to the well at a time of the day when the other women were not there. This is in John 4. And as she was going out, she went out there for a reason, because she did not want to be with the other women. She did not want that, conversation and social interaction with the other women, and they probably likewise did not want her there. And so she went out to this well by herself in the heat of the day to get water. She is not interested. There's no indication she's interested in God at all. But when Jesus comes to her and he says, would you give me a drink? Then she's a little bit thrown aside, because she knows that he knows her. At least he knows the kind of woman she is. But in the course of the conversation, she becomes awakened. She realizes she's talking to a prophet, and she asks him a question. Now, it's at this point that we realize, and if you look at all awakened people, when a person becomes awakened, they begin to seek God. They're not necessarily seeking to make the relationship with God right, but they're seeking to present to God some kind of justification for their life. Everyone wants to be perceived as good or as justifying their behavior. If their behavior is not good, they want to be able to at least justify their behavior as being not as bad as someone else. And in order to do that, they have to come up with a list of things that will put them in a better position with God. And this I call the list. You can always tell an awakened person from the incorrigible, the one who's not seeking, because the awakened person has a list. The rich young ruler had it in his pocket. He reaches in and Jesus says, he has his dialogue with Jesus, and he reaches and he pulls out his list. He's got it. He says, what about the 10 Commandments? Jesus says, what about your list? And he pulls out his list and he says, I'm checked. Everything's checked off. Everything's good. Saul of Tarsus, he had a list, and he names his list in Philippians chapter 3. He says, I'm a Hebrew, I'm a Jew, I'm a Pharisee, I'm perfect according to my list. I'm perfect. Not only am I perfect, but I'm zealously persecuting the other people, the non-people that different from me. And so you will always tell a person who is awakened. People who are awakened go to church. They go to revival meetings, to crusades. They'll do whatever it takes. Anything you give them on a list, they will do it. And now here's where it's very important for us to understand the difference between the gospel, the kingdom of God, and how Jesus ministers to people, as opposed to just having a religious conversion rather than a spiritual conversion, is Jesus does not give them another thing to do on their list. The rich young ruler, he could have said, take a ship cross the Mediterranean Sea and win some convert over there, or give your life for a great cause or something. That guy probably would have done it. But he didn't do that. He looked at him, he looked in his heart, and he said, what's the most important thing to you? You give it up for me. Jesus did the same thing with the woman at the well. He didn't answer the question of, as soon as she got a list, she says, which church is the right church? Do I go to the northern mountain church or do I go to the southern mountain church? So many people that have a list, they want to know which church to go to. That's one of the first things they do. And then smoking and drinking goes right down the list too. But the first thing they want to know is, which church do I go to? A person that asks that question is awakened. They're not ready for the gospel. And this is very key. They're not ready for the gospel because they think that you give them one more thing to do. If you say join a church, they'll join a church. If you say become a deacon, they'll become a deacon. You say become an elder, they'll become an elder. Like when I was young, I had done everything my church had requested, and I thought, well, the next step is to become a pastor. And so I made a commitment to become pastor before I was even a Christian, because that was a list of things that I had in my life. And so Jesus doesn't deal with he deals with the heart. He bypasses the list, and he goes right to the heart. He told the woman at the well, go get your husband. He told the rich young ruler, go sell everything you have. Why? Because that was where their heart was. And he goes for the heart. Now, when working with the awakened, if you ask them to pray a prayer, they'll pray it. If you ask them to join a church, they'll join the church. But that's not what they need. What they need is to know that sin is in their heart. Now, the prodigal son, he starts making a list. I'm going to get a job. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. And I'm going to clean up my life. I'm going to get my money back or whatever. I'm going to feed myself. I'm going to take care of myself. And then he came to his senses. He says, I'm a sinner. Now, does that show that he is moved from awakening? It shows that he's in a process. Because the next step is realizing in our heart. It's taking the gospel to the heart. Now, an awakened person is not ready to receive Christ until something else happens. And the first thing we have to do to bring this person from awakening to the next one, which is conviction, is we need to deal with the heart of sin in their life.